My name is Jessica, I'm 28, and I thought I knew my family until 3 months ago when I discovered my parents had secretly transferred my $60,000 wedding fund, money I'd been contributing to since I was 16, directly into my sister's mortgage account for her dream home. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was the moment I realized that in my family's eyes, I had always been the expendable daughter, the one whose dreams could be sacrificed for the golden child's happiness. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this absolute mess of family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If you're ready for a story about family betrayal, financial manipulation, and some seriously satisfying karma, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because this revenge story has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the ending. It's going to blow your mind. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, the family hierarchy was crystal clear from day one. My younger sister Madison, now 25, was the princess who could do no wrong. She was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one who brought home straight A's without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, I was the practical one, the responsible one, the daughter who worked part-time jobs throughout high school while Madison got a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday. Our parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, never tried to hide their favoritism. When Madison wanted dance lessons, violin classes, or expensive summer camps, the answer was always an immediate yes. When I asked for similar opportunities, I was told we needed to budget carefully and make smart financial decisions. The message was loud and clear. Madison's dreams mattered, mine were optional. The wedding fund started when I was 16 and got my first real job at a local coffee shop. My grandmother, my dad's mother, had always believed in equality between her granddaughters. She proposed the idea during one of our Sunday dinners. "Every young woman deserves a beautiful wedding," she announced, looking directly at my parents. "I'll contribute $200 a month to Jessica's wedding fund if you match it." It seemed like the perfect solution, a way for me to finally have something special, something that was truly mine. My parents agreed, probably because saying no in front of Grandma Thompson would have exposed their favoritism too obviously. The plan was simple. They would contribute $200 monthly, I would add whatever I could from my part-time jobs, and Grandma would match their contribution. Over 12 years, this fund was supposed to grow into something substantial that would give me the wedding I'd always dreamed of. I took this responsibility seriously, maybe too seriously. Throughout high school, I worked 20 hours a week at the coffee shop, later moving to a restaurant where I could earn better tips. In college, I juggled 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA in accounting. Every month, without fail, I deposited money into what I believed was our family's shared commitment to my future happiness. Some months it was $50, other months it was $200, but I never missed a payment. Meanwhile, Madison breezed through college on my parents' dime, changed her major 3 times, and spent a semester finding herself in Europe. When she graduated with a communications degree and no clear career path, my parents supported her dream of becoming a lifestyle blogger. They paid for professional photography equipment, a high-end laptop, and even hired a marketing consultant to help build her brand. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was scraping together every dollar for my future wedding, Madison was living her best life with unlimited parental funding. But I convinced myself that this was just how families worked. Some children need more support than others, and I was the independent one who could handle taking care of herself. After college, I landed a solid job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Hartford. The work was steady, the pay was decent, and I finally felt like I was building toward something real. My boyfriend Jake, who I'd met during my senior year, was a software engineer with similar values about hard work and financial responsibility. We'd been dating for 4 years, living together for 2, and wedding conversations were becoming more frequent and serious. During family dinners, when the topic of my relationship came up, my parents would make subtle comments about not rushing into marriage, about making sure I was really ready for such a big commitment. Yet whenever Madison brought home a new boyfriend, and there were many, they welcomed each one like a potential son-in-law, even the ones who were obviously using her for her trust fund access. The double standard was exhausting, but I'd learned to navigate around it. I focused on building my own life, my own success, and my own happiness. The wedding fund represented more than just money to me. It symbolized my ability to create something beautiful despite being the overlooked daughter. Every deposit felt like proof that I could make my dreams happen, even without the unconditional support Madison took for granted. Last spring, Madison announced she was engaged to Trevor, a real estate developer she'd been dating for 8 months. The engagement ring was a spectacular 2-carat diamond that cost more than my car, and suddenly every family conversation revolved around wedding planning, venue shopping, and guest lists. My parents were over the moon, immediately offering to pay for everything and suggesting they start looking at venues that cost more per night than most people's annual salaries. But then came the plot twist that nobody saw coming. Madison, who had never shown any interest in traditional weddings, suddenly decided she didn't want a big celebration at all. "Weddings are just outdated patriarchal displays," she announced during Sunday dinner, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured dramatically. "Trevor and I want to elope in Bali and use our wedding money for something more meaningful, like buying our dream home." My parents were initially disappointed, having already started planning what would have been the social event of the season. But Madison, being Madison, knew exactly how to sell her new vision. She pulled out her phone and showed us pictures of a stunning craftsman-style house that had just come on the market in the most desirable neighborhood in town. The house was beautiful for bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a backyard that looked like something out of Better Homes and Gardens. "This is where Trevor and I want to start our life together," she said, scrolling through the photos. "It's $350,000, which is perfect because we have some savings. Trevor has his down payment ready, and you guys were planning to spend at least $60,000 on the wedding anyway. If we combine everything, we can buy this house outright and start our marriage debt-free." The logic seemed sound, and my parents were already nodding along with her plan. Madison had always been persuasive, able to make her desires seem not just reasonable but inevitable. As she continued talking about property values and investment opportunities, I watched my parents fall in love with this new version of their daughter's future, the responsible homeowner, the savvy investor, the young woman who was making smart financial decisions. What happened next should have been a red flag, but I was too caught up in family dinner dynamics to see it clearly. My father started asking specific questions about down payments and closing costs. My mother wondered aloud about furniture budgets and moving expenses. And Madison, with the confidence that came from a lifetime of getting everything she wanted, began talking about timelines and mortgage pre-approvals as if the money was already in her account. "The seller wants to close quickly," she explained, "which actually works in our favor because we can get a better price. But we'd need to move fast, like within the next month or 2. I remember thinking it was sweet how quickly my parents adapted to Madison's change of plans. They'd been so excited about planning a wedding, but they seemed equally thrilled about helping her buy her first home. Family dynamics had always been complicated in our house, but this felt different somehow. There was an urgency to their conversations, a sense that big decisions were being made quickly and quietly. Over the following weeks, Madison's house hunting became the primary topic of every family interaction. She would send group texts with photos from open houses, call my mother to discuss neighborhood comparisons, and monopolize every Sunday dinner with updates about inspections and negotiations. My parents were completely invested in her home buying journey, offering advice, making connections with real estate professionals they knew, and celebrating every small milestone in the process. Meanwhile, Jake and I were quietly planning our own future. We'd been looking at engagement rings, discussing venue options, and having those important conversations about what kind of wedding we actually wanted. I was excited to finally start using the wedding fund that had been growing for over a decade. The account balance had reached almost exactly $60,000, a number that represented 12 years of careful saving, sacrifice, and planning. I should have been more involved in the family discussions about Madison's house. I should have asked more questions about where the money was coming from and how the financing was working out. But honestly, I was just relieved that for once, a family crisis didn't require my intervention or assistance. Madison seemed to have everything under control. My parents were happy, and I could focus on my own life without feeling guilty about not being more supportive. That was my mistake, assuming that my family's financial decisions didn't involve me, trusting that the money I'd been faithfully contributing to for 12 years was safe and separate from Madison's latest adventure. The truth came out on a Tuesday morning in July, exactly 3 days after Madison closed on her dream house. I was at my desk at work, reviewing quarterly reports, when I decided to check my wedding fund balance online. Jake and I had been seriously discussing engagement timelines, and I wanted to know exactly what we were working with for wedding planning. I logged into the account, expecting to see the familiar balance that had grown steadily over the years. Instead, the screen showed a balance of $347.22. For a moment, I stared at the number, convinced there had been some kind of technical error. I refreshed the page, logged out and back in, even called the bank's customer service line to report what I assumed was a serious glitch in their system. The customer service representative, a patient woman named Carol, walked me through the account history. "Ma'am, I see a large withdrawal of $59,652.78 on July 15th. The withdrawal was authorized by Robert Thompson, who is listed as the primary account holder. Would you like me to provide more details about this transaction?" My hands started shaking as the reality hit me. July 15th was exactly 1 week ago, the same day Madison had posted on Instagram about getting the keys to her new house, surrounded by my parents and Trevor, all of them holding champagne glasses and celebrating this major milestone. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need all the details you can give me." Carol explained that the money had been transferred directly to a mortgage company, with Madison Thompson listed as the beneficiary. The transaction had been processed as a wire transfer, which explained why it had gone through so quickly and quietly. There was no fraud, no error, no technical glitch. My father had simply moved my wedding fund directly into Madison's home purchase. I hung up the phone and sat in my cubicle, staring at my computer screen, trying to process what had just happened. 12 years of saving, 12 years of deposits, 12 years of believing that my family supported my dreams and my future, gone. Not just gone, but deliberately taken and given to my sister without any conversation, consultation, or even notification. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt physically sick. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary loan. This was theft, plain and simple. But it was legal theft because my father's name was on the account, and I had trusted my family enough to allow that arrangement. I left work early that day, claiming I felt ill, which wasn't technically a lie. I drove straight to my parents' house, where I found my mother in the kitchen, humming while she arranged flowers. She looked up when I walked in, smiling brightly as if nothing had changed. "Jessica, what a nice surprise. I was just thinking about calling you to see if you wanted to come to dinner this Sunday. Madison and Trevor want to show us their furniture plans for the new house." "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk about my wedding fund." The change in her expression was immediate and telling. The bright smile faded, replaced by a look of uncomfortable awareness. She knew exactly what I was talking about, which meant this hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment decision or a miscommunication between my parents. "Oh, honey," she said, setting down the flowers and turning to face me fully. "I was wondering when you'd notice. Your father was going to call you this week to explain everything. Explain what, exactly? Explain how you stole $60,000 from me to buy Madison a house. My mother's face flushed, and she immediately went into defensive mode. Jessica, that's not fair, and you know it. That money was always meant to help both our daughters, and Madison needed it right now. You're not even engaged yet, and when you do get married, we'll figure something out. This was just better timing for Madison. The casual dismissal of my feelings, the assumption that my dreams could be put on hold indefinitely while Madison's were prioritized immediately, was exactly the dynamic I'd grown up with. But hearing it applied to something so significant, so personal, and so financially substantial made me realize just how deep the favoritism ran. Better timing. I repeated, my voice rising. Mom, I've been contributing to that fund for 12 years. 12 years. I've put my own money into that account every single month since I was 16 years old. That wasn't family money, that was my money, combined with the contributions you and Dad promised to make. And we did make those contributions, she said defensively. For years, we put money into that account just like we promised. But Jessica, you have to understand, Madison needed help right now, and that house was perfect for her. Real estate is a good investment, and this way the money is still in the family. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but it was clear that my mother saw nothing wrong with what they'd done. In her mind, they'd simply moved family money around to help the daughter who needed it most at the moment. The fact that I'd been saving and sacrificing for over a decade didn't factor into her calculations. When my father came home, the conversation repeated with slight variations. He was more apologetic in tone, but equally firm in his justification. Jessica, you're the responsible one. You'll figure out how to have a beautiful wedding without needing us to hand you everything. Madison needed our help to get started, and we knew you'd understand. That night, I called Jake and told him everything. His reaction was immediate and fierce. He wanted to drive over to my parents' house and demand they reverse the transaction. But we both knew it was too late. The money was already tied up in Madison's mortgage, and legally, my parents had every right to do what they'd done. The real betrayal wasn't just financial, it was the complete lack of consideration for my feelings, my plans, and my contributions. They'd made a major decision that directly impacted my future without even consulting me. They'd assumed I would be understanding, that I would accept having my dreams delayed indefinitely so Madison could have hers immediately. That's when I realized something that changed everything. If my family could make unilateral decisions about my money, I could make unilateral decisions about my relationship with them. The scared, people-pleasing daughter who had spent 12 years quietly accepting the crumbs was about to transform into someone they'd never seen before. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to ask, have you ever had a moment where you realized your family saw you completely differently than you saw yourself? Where you discovered that the people you trusted most had been making calculations about your life behind your back? If this story is hitting close to home, stick around because what happened next proves that sometimes the overlooked child has more power than anyone realizes. The first thing I did was document everything. As an accountant, I knew the importance of creating a paper trail. I printed out 12 years of bank statements showing my contributions to the wedding fund, photographed receipts from my various jobs, and created a detailed spreadsheet showing exactly how much money I'd personally contributed versus what my parents had promised to match. The numbers were sobering. Out of the $60,000 that had been in the account, I had personally contributed $31,847.33. My grandmother had contributed $28,800 over the 12 years before she passed away 3 years ago. My parents' actual contributions totaled $12,352.67, far less than the $28,800 they had promised to match with my grandmother's contributions. Not only had they stolen money that was partially mine, they'd been lying about their own contributions for years. Armed with this information, I scheduled a formal family meeting. I sent an email to my parents and Madison, requesting that we all sit down together to discuss what had happened and how we were going to resolve it. The tone of my email was professional and calm. I was treating this like a business negotiation, not an emotional family drama. Madison's response was immediate and predictable. "Jess, I can't believe you're making such a big deal about this. Mom and Dad explained that they'll help you when you actually need it. I needed help right now, and family is supposed to support each other. Stop being so dramatic." My parents' responses were more measured, but equally dismissive. They agreed to meet, but their emails made it clear they expected this conversation to end with me accepting their decision and apologizing for making such a fuss. The family meeting took place on a Sunday afternoon in my parents' living room. The same room where Madison had first shown us pictures of her dream house. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. I came prepared with my documentation, a printed agenda, and a list of demands that I'd spent the previous week crafting with Jake's input. "Before we start," I announced, setting my folder on the coffee table, "I want everyone to understand that this isn't a discussion about whether what you did was right or wrong. What you did was theft, and we're here to talk about how you're going to make it right." My father immediately bristled. "Jessica, that's not fair. We're your parents, and we made a decision that we felt was best for the whole family. You can't just march in here and start making accusations." "Actually, Dad, I can," I replied, opening my folder. "Because I have documentation showing that $32,000 of that money came directly from my paychecks over 12 years. You didn't just take family money, you took my money and gave it to Madison without asking my permission." I walked them through the spreadsheet, showing exactly how much each person had contributed and when. The room grew quieter as the numbers made it clear that this wasn't just about wedding money, it was about a substantial personal investment that had been redirected without my consent. Madison, who had been scrolling through her phone for the first part of the meeting, finally looked up when she realized the conversation wasn't going according to script. "Jessica, I had no idea you'd put that much of your own money in." Mom and Dad made it sound like it was mostly their contribution. "Because they lied," I said simply. "To you and to me. They've been contributing less than they promised while I've been faithfully putting in money every month for over a decade." The meeting continued for 2 hours. My parents alternated between defensive justifications and patronizing attempts to minimize my concerns. Madison swung between genuine surprise at learning how much I'd contributed and irritation that I was ruining her happiness over money. My demands were straightforward. I wanted my $31,847.33 returned within 90 days, plus interest calculated at the rate the wedding fund had been earning. If they couldn't return the money, I wanted them to take out a loan against Madison's house to repay me. I also demanded a written apology acknowledging that they had violated my trust and made a decision about my money without my consent. "And if you don't agree to these terms," I concluded, "I'll be taking legal action to recover my money, and I'll be sharing this story with everyone we know so they understand exactly what kind of people you really are." The threat of public embarrassment got their attention in a way that my hurt feelings hadn't. My parents prided themselves on their reputation in the community, and the idea of their friends and neighbors knowing they'd stolen from one daughter to benefit the other was clearly disturbing to them. But they weren't ready to capitulate completely. My father, trying to regain control of the situation, made an offer. "Jessica, we understand you're upset, and we're willing to compromise. We'll give you $20,000 toward your wedding when you get engaged, and we'll consider that a fair resolution." $20,000. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You took $60,000, $32,000 of which was mine, and you're offering me $20,000 as a compromise? That's not how this works." Madison finally spoke up, and her words revealed exactly how she'd been thinking about this situation. "Jessica, you have to understand that I needed this house. Trevor and I are starting our life together, and having our own place was really important to us. You're not even engaged yet, so it's not like you needed the money right away. When you do get married, everyone will pitch in to help. It'll work out." The casual dismissal of my timeline, the assumption that my dreams were less urgent than hers, the expectation that I should be grateful for whatever scraps the family decided to give me whenever they deemed it appropriate. It was the same pattern that had defined our entire relationship, but now it involved stealing $32,000 from me. That's when I realized negotiating wasn't going to work. My family saw nothing wrong with what they'd done, and they expected me to eventually accept their decision and move on. They were counting on my history of being the reasonable one, the daughter who didn't make waves, the person who could always be counted on to put family harmony above her own needs. They had no idea they were dealing with a completely different person now. "Okay," I said, closing my folder and standing up. "Since you're not willing to make this right, I'll handle it my way." I walked out of their house that day knowing it might be the last time I'd be welcome there as their daughter. But for the first time in my life, I felt completely free to prioritize my own needs and desires over their comfort and convenience. The war had begun, and they had no idea what they'd unleashed. Over the next 2 weeks, I executed a plan that would have made Sun Tzu proud. The key to effective revenge isn't explosive anger, it's patient, calculated action that targets exactly what your opponents value most. For my parents, that was their reputation and social standing. For Madison, it was her perfect life narrative and her financial security. I started with research. Living in a small Connecticut town has its advantages when you're gathering intelligence. I spent my evenings after work digging into Madison's finances, Trevor's business dealings, and my parents' social connections. What I discovered was fascinating and far more useful than I'd expected. Trevor's real estate development company, which Madison constantly bragged about, was actually struggling financially. He'd taken on too many projects during the pandemic and was now overextended with several properties that weren't selling. More importantly, he'd been using creative financing arrangements that looked impressive on paper but were incredibly risky in reality. Madison's lifestyle blogging career, which my parents had been funding for 2 years, was generating less than $500 per month in actual revenue. The professional equipment, marketing consultants, and travel expenses they'd paid for had produced a social media presence that looked successful but wasn't remotely profitable. My parents, meanwhile, had been telling their friends and neighbors that they were helping both daughters equally, that Jessica was the independent one who didn't need help, while Madison was the artistic one who needed more support to find her path. They'd crafted a narrative that made their favoritism sound like thoughtful parenting rather than blatant bias. Armed with this information, I began systematically dismantling the fiction they'd all built around Madison's success and my independence. The first strike was financial. I contacted the mortgage company that held Madison's loan and informed them that a significant portion of their down payment had come from money that was legally mine. I provided documentation showing my contributions and requested information about their policies regarding fraudulent down payments. While the mortgage company couldn't immediately reverse the transaction, they opened an investigation and froze any plans Madison and Trevor had to refinance or take out additional loans against the property. This effectively trapped them in their current financial situation and prevented them from accessing any equity they might have been counting on. Next, I reached out to every social media platform where Madison had built her lifestyle brand. I created detailed reports showing that her success was artificially funded by family money, not generated through legitimate business activities. Instagram and TikTok both have strict policies about authentic content, and several of Madison's sponsored posts were flagged for review when I provided evidence that her lifestyle wasn't supported by her actual income. The most satisfying part was watching Madison's carefully curated online presence begin to crumble. Brands started pulling sponsorship deals when they realized her engagement numbers didn't match her actual influence. The lifestyle blogger who'd been showcasing her perfect home and perfect relationship suddenly had to explain why several companies were ending their partnerships with her. But the nuclear option was still coming. I'd been saving the best for last. I scheduled lunch meetings with 5 of my parents' closest friends, couples they'd known for decades, people whose opinions they valued above almost everything else. During these lunches, I calmly explained what had happened with my wedding fund, providing documentation and allowing them to draw their own conclusions about my parents' character and decision-making. The reactions were exactly what I'd hoped for. Martha Henderson, my mother's closest friend, was appalled. "Jessica, I had no idea. Your mother always talks about how proud she is of both her daughters, but she never mentioned that you'd been saving your own money all these years." Bob and Carol Mitchell, who had been friends with my parents since college, were equally disturbed. "Your father always talks about teaching you girls financial responsibility," Bob said, shaking his head. "But this isn't financial responsibility, this is favoritism, plain and simple." Each conversation ended the same way, with these family friends expressing serious concerns about my parents' judgment and character. More importantly, they began asking pointed questions during social events, making comments about fairness between children, and generally creating the kind of social pressure that my parents couldn't ignore or dismiss. The beauty of this approach was that I never asked anyone to take sides or cut contact with my parents. I simply provided information and let people form their own opinions. But the cumulative effect was devastating to my parents' reputation in their social circle. At the same time, I was building my own support network. Jake and I had decided to move forward with our engagement regardless of the wedding fund situation. He proposed on a Saturday evening in August, and I said yes to a life with someone who valued fairness, honesty, and partnership above family politics. We announced our engagement on social media and began planning a wedding that reflected our values rather than my family's expectations. Instead of the elaborate affair I'd originally imagined, we designed a celebration that was beautiful, meaningful, and completely funded by the two of us. But the most important part of my strategy was documenting everything. Every text message from Madison complaining about her sponsorship problems, every awkward encounter with family friends, every piece of evidence that showed how my actions were affecting their lives, I saved it all. By September, the pressure was becoming unbearable for my family. Madison's perfect life was unraveling in very public ways. My parents were facing uncomfortable questions from friends who had previously admired their parenting. Trevor's business problems were becoming harder to hide, and the house that was supposed to represent their success was starting to feel more like a financial burden. That's when Madison made the mistake that gave me the final piece of leverage I needed. She called me on a Thursday evening, crying and desperate. "Jessica, you have to stop this. My whole life is falling apart because of what you're doing. Trevor is talking about selling the house because we can't afford the maintenance costs, and I'm losing all my brand partnerships. This isn't fair. I didn't know how much money you'd put in, and Mom and Dad made it sound like it was their decision to make." "Madison," I said calmly, "you had no problem benefiting from money that wasn't yours when you thought it was just family money. The fact that $32,000 of it came directly from my paychecks doesn't change anything from your perspective." "But I didn't know," she insisted. "If I'd known it was your money, I never would have agreed to use it." "Really?" I asked. "So if I can prove you knew exactly where the money came from, you'd be willing to give it back?" There was a long pause. "What do you mean, prove I knew?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "Madison, you sent Mom a text message in June asking if my wedding fund had enough money to cover your down payment shortfall. You specifically mentioned that you knew I'd been contributing to it for years and wondered if there was a way to borrow some of it temporarily." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Madison had forgotten about that text message, but I'd seen it when my mother left her phone on the kitchen counter during one of our wedding fund discussions. I'd photographed it then, knowing it might be useful later. That's not what I meant," she stammered. "I was just asking a hypothetical question." "A hypothetical question that led to you getting exactly what you asked for," I replied. "Madison, you knew that money was partially mine, and you took it anyway. The only difference between you and a stranger who steals my purse is that you're family." That conversation was the turning point. Madison finally understood that I had evidence of her knowledge and complicity, which meant her claims of innocence were worthless. More importantly, she realized that I wasn't going to be satisfied with apologies or promises. I wanted my money back, and I had the tools to keep making her life miserable until I got it. The war was almost over, but the final battle was going to be the most satisfying one yet. October brought the consequences I'd been orchestrating for months. Madison's lifestyle brand had completely collapsed. Every major sponsorship was gone. Her follower count was dropping daily. And the lifestyle blog that was supposed to be her career had become a source of mockery in online forums where people discussed fake influencers. Trevor's business was in freefall. 2 of his development projects had failed to find buyers, and he was facing potential bankruptcy by the end of the year. The stress was destroying their relationship, and Madison was finally seeing what Trevor was really like when his charming facade cracked under financial pressure. My parents were dealing with their own crisis. The social pressure from their friend group had become unbearable. Martha Henderson had stopped inviting my mother to their weekly book club. Bob Mitchell had declined my father's invitation to their annual golf weekend. Neighbors who had previously admired their beautiful home and successful daughters were now whispering about favoritism and family dysfunction. But the real shock came when my parents received a letter from their homeowner's insurance company. Apparently, several of their neighbors had filed complaints about noise, property maintenance issues, and other problems that had never existed before. Someone had been making anonymous reports that triggered investigations and potential policy changes. That someone was me, of course. I'd spent weeks researching exactly what kinds of issues could create problems for homeowners in their upscale neighborhood, and I'd been systematically reporting violations that were technically accurate but had never bothered anyone before. The cumulative effect was that my parents were facing increased insurance costs, potential fines from the Homeowners Association, and social isolation from people they'd considered close friends for decades. Their comfortable retirement was becoming stressful and expensive in ways they'd never anticipated. Madison called me again in late October, but this time she wasn't crying, she was angry. "Jessica, this has gone far enough. You've destroyed my career, you're ruining Mom and Dad's friendships, and now Trevor is talking about leaving me because he can't handle the stress. What more do you want?" "I want my $32,000 back, plus interest and compensation for the financial harm your theft has caused me," I said. "Same thing I've wanted since July. We can't afford to give you that much money. The house payments are killing us, Trevor's business is failing, and I have no income. You know we don't have $32,000 to give you." "Then you should sell the house," I replied simply. "Use the equity to pay me back, and find somewhere more affordable to live." "Sell the house? Jessica, this is our dream home. We can't just sell it because you're having a tantrum about money. Madison, you stole my money to buy that house. If you can't afford to keep it without the money you stole from me, then you can't afford to keep it. Period." The conversation ended with Madison hanging up on me, but I knew the pressure was working. Trevor had started asking pointed questions about where their down payment had really come from, and Madison was running out of ways to avoid telling him the truth. 2 weeks later, my mother called. "Jessica, we need to talk. This situation has gone too far, and we need to find a way to resolve it that works for everyone." "I've been waiting for that conversation since July," I said. "What are you prepared to offer?" "Your father and I have talked to a financial advisor, and we think we can get you most of your money back. We're willing to take out a home equity loan to give you $25,000, and Madison has agreed to pay you the remaining $7,000 over the next 2 years. "That's not acceptable," I said immediately. "I want my full $32,000, plus 6 months of interest, plus compensation for the stress and damage this has caused. The total is $35,000, and I want it within 30 days. "Jessica, be reasonable. We're offering you most of your money back, and that's more than we technically owe you since your name wasn't on the account." "Mom, legally you might not owe me anything, but morally and ethically, you owe me everything I put into that account plus damages. If you're not willing to make this right, I'll continue making your lives uncomfortable until you are. Are you threatening us? I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply explaining that the consequences you're experiencing now will continue until you return what you stole from me. That conversation ended badly, but it accomplished what I needed. My parents finally understood that I wasn't going to accept a partial resolution or a payment plan. They were dealing with a version of their daughter they'd never seen before, and traditional family pressure tactics weren't going to work. The breaking point came in November when Trevor discovered the truth about their down payment. Madison had been trying to hide the details, but the stress of their failing finances finally forced her to admit that their house had been purchased with money stolen from me. Trevor's reaction was nuclear. He'd been dealing with business failures and relationship stress for months, and learning that his girlfriend had essentially committed theft to buy their house was the final straw. He moved out the next day and filed paperwork to remove his name from the mortgage, leaving Madison solely responsible for a house payment she couldn't afford. The irony was perfect. Madison had stolen my money to secure her dream home and perfect relationship, but her actions had destroyed both. Without Trevor's income and with no career prospects, she couldn't maintain the mortgage payments. The house that was supposed to represent her success had become a financial prison. 3 days after Trevor left, Madison called me one final time. "Jessica, I'll give you everything back. All of it. Just please stop destroying my life." "How exactly are you planning to give me $35,000 when you have no income and no boyfriend?" I asked. "I'm selling the house," she said quietly. "The realtor thinks we can get enough to pay off the mortgage and give you what you want. I'll move back in with Mom and Dad until I figure out what to do next." "And what about the acknowledgement that what you did was theft?" "Fine. I'll admit it. I knew the money was partially yours, and I took it anyway because I wanted the house more than I cared about being fair to you. Are you happy now?" Actually, I was. Not because Madison was suffering, but because she was finally experiencing the consequences of her choices. For the first time in our lives, the golden child was learning that actions have repercussions and that stealing from family members isn't a victimless crime. The final resolution came just before Christmas, exactly 5 months after I'd discovered the theft. Madison sold the house for enough money to pay off her mortgage and return my full $35,000. My parents, faced with the complete collapse of their social standing and the undeniable evidence of their favoritism, agreed to reimburse me for the legal fees I'd incurred during my campaign for justice. But the most satisfying moment wasn't getting my money back. It was the family meeting where they all had to acknowledge what they'd done and how it had affected me. My father, the man who had taught me about financial responsibility while stealing my savings, formally apologized for violating my trust. My mother admitted that their favoritism toward Madison had been unfair and hurtful. And Madison, stripped of her perfect life and forced to move back into her childhood bedroom, acknowledged that she had knowingly participated in theft. The money allowed Jake and me to have the wedding we'd always wanted, but more importantly, it represented something far more valuable, proof that I didn't have to accept unfair treatment just because it came from family members. Standing up for myself had been terrifying, but it had also been liberating in ways I'd never expected. Madison's influencer career never recovered, and she eventually took a regular job in marketing at a local company. Trevor's business did fail, and he moved to another state to start over. My parents rebuilt some of their social relationships, but they never regained the respect they'd lost when people learned how they'd treated their daughters differently. As for me, I learned that being the responsible child doesn't mean accepting responsibility for other people's poor decisions. It means holding everyone accountable for their actions, including family members who think blood relations should excuse theft and betrayal. The wedding Jake and I had was beautiful, paid for entirely with money that was rightfully mine, surrounded by people who had earned their place in our lives through respect and genuine care. My parents attended, but they sat in the back, understanding that their front row seats had been forfeited when they chose favoritism over fairness. Looking back, I realized that my family's betrayal was actually a gift. It forced me to develop boundaries I'd never had, to value myself in ways I'd never learned, and to understand that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who need the strongest consequences for their actions. The $60,000 was never really about the money. It was about respect, equality, and the basic principle that families should lift each other up, not steal from each other to benefit the favorite child. When my parents and Madison violated that principle, they learned that the quiet, responsible daughter they'd taken for granted was capable of fighting back in ways they'd never imagined. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for justice within your own family? Have you experienced favoritism that crossed the line into financial harm? Drop a comment below and let me know how you handled family betrayal, because stories like these show us that we're not alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics. If this revenge story satisfied your need for justice, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of karma coming full circle. Share this video with anyone who's ever been the overlooked family member. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that we have more power than we think. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family drama and ultimate vindication. And remember, blood doesn't excuse theft, and being family doesn't mean accepting unfair treatment. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people you love is show them the consequences of their choices. Until next time, keep standing up for yourselves and never let anyone convince you that your dreams matter less than someone else's.